Noah Evans never thought there would come a day when he'd find himself bent over, washing dishes in the very restaurant that bore his name. Hot water poured over hands that had grown calloused from shaking hands with big investors. But this time, he didn't feel powerful anymore. All that remained was the sound of water trickling, the scent of soap, and the slippery, grimy plates dropping into the stainless steel sink with sharp, jarring clangs. Just 3 months ago, Noah was still the respected CEO of Evans Table, a luxurious restaurant empire across California. He once sat high above the city streets, signing million-dollar contracts with a confident smile. But one night, when everything had gone quiet, Noah sat alone in his office, reading the endless stream of one-star reviews popping up on his screen. "I've never seen anyone treat customers like they're doing them a favor." Cold food, dirty tables, employees arguing in front of customers. "If it hadn't been for that young waitress, my son would have ended up in the hospital from an allergic reaction." Noah's eyes stopped on that last line. Who was that young waitress? How had she managed to save a child when his entire management and training system had done nothing? The reports from consulting firms were filled with nothing but numbers and pretty phrases. Recommendations for improving customer experience, enhanced employee training, evaluate branch management. But no one was telling Noah what was truly happening inside his own restaurant. Noah knew that if he didn't step down himself, everything would continue to rot, slowly, piece by piece, until he lost everything he had built. And so, he became Leo Torres, a 48-year-old man with dyed grey hair, a slight hunch in his back, scratched-up glasses, and a complete fake resume that listed him as a dishwasher and prep cook for small local diners. On his first day, Leo walked into the Stockton branch carrying a cheap bag, only to be yelled at by the night shift manager, Brad, from the moment he stepped in because he was standing in the wrong spot in line. "Hey, old man, move it. We don't have room here for slowpokes," Brad growled, his voice dripping with contempt, as the tired employees lining up for their shift stared on, their eyes filled with resignation. Leo lowered his head, gave a small nod, and said nothing. His eyes caught the young, weary faces, avoiding Brad's gaze, as if fearing that a single mistake would cost them their jobs. A petite girl with neatly tied hair stepped forward to pick up the menu, her deep brown eyes carrying an unspoken worry that was hard to name. Her name was Ava Lewis. Leo learned this when she quietly nodded at him by the beverage counter, her eyes silently trying to say something she could not bring herself to speak aloud. That first night, Leo learned how to wipe down tables quickly, how to lower his gaze whenever Brad walked past, how to remain silent when Marcus, the head chef, threw a hot plate of food straight into the trash because it had sat for more than 4 minutes. He learned to listen to the whispered exchanges between employees whenever they found a moment to talk quietly. Another customer complaint again. "Brad's gonna make us pay for that plate the customer didn't finish." And Ava, she's asking for the closing shift again so she can stay longer. Noah realized that in the thick, greasy, smoky air of that kitchen there existed fearful glances, silent, lowered heads, and beads of sweat dropping onto the dirty, wet tile floors, mixing with the dishwater he was on his knees scrubbing. Yet in all of this, Ava's eyes kept flashing through his mind each night as he lay on a thin mattress in his cheap rented room. Her eyes weren't just filled with fear. There was something bigger, deeper, simmering beneath. Was it pain, a secret, a truth? Noah Evans had never thought he'd fall into this situation, but in that moment, sitting by the dish sink, his hands trembling under the hot water, he knew he was close to finding the answer. And that answer might not just save a dying restaurant, but it might save the people trapped in fear, injustice, and in the endless grind of exhausting work, only to receive a paycheck cut short by a greedy manager. The next day, Leo arrived early. He stood in the parking lot, staring at the flickering neon sign of Evans' Table blinking tiredly through the cold morning mist. In that moment, he realized this was no longer just a company, just a restaurant chain. This was about people, their stories, their hidden pain. Inside, the morning shift was painfully quiet. Marcus, the head chef, was quietly arranging the food trays, his hands trembling slightly as Brad walked in. Brad glanced over at Leo, smirking. "Old man, wash those dishes fast. If the floor's wet, I'm docking your pay." Leo lowered his head. "Yes, sir." But his eyes kept observing the way Brad walked past each employee, clapping them on the back, just hard enough to make them flinch. The way he glanced through the sales book and barked at Maria, a young waitress. Table 9 walked out without paying. "You'll cover that on your evening shift." Maria lowered her head, her shoulders trembling slightly. Leo heard the muffled sob as Maria ran into the walk-in fridge, the door slamming shut. A moment of silence. Then a soft, stifled cry echoed from inside. Noah once believed that failure was when a branch closed down, costing hundreds of thousands of dollars. But now he understood that true failure was when a young woman had to cry in the walk-in fridge because she couldn't afford to pay bills, forced to shoulder the blame for mistakes that weren't her fault. In that moment, Leo saw Ava. She stepped up to Maria, saying nothing, simply placing her hand gently on the trembling girl's shoulder. Ava's eyes, calm, warm, without judgment, felt like a silent embrace. Maria looked up, her eyes red, nodded, wiped her tears, and returned to work. Ava didn't speak much. She only nodded at Leo as she passed by the dish station. But her eyes spoke more than any polished report Noah had ever read. Here, if we don't help each other, we won't survive. All morning, Leo noticed that Ava always took the hardest tables, difficult customers, elderly guests, or families with small children. She was quick, meticulous, checking every dish before taking it out, adjusting the silverware, wiping off any sauce drips. When children cried, she would bend down to their eye level, smile, and offer them a small cookie or a lemonade. Her eyes would light up gently, but as she turned away, her shoulders would droop again. Brad looked at Ava with clear annoyance. He called her over. "Ava, what's taking you so long? The food's getting cold. Customers are complaining." Ava remained silent, lowered her head, took the receipt, and quickly walked back to the kitchen. Leo saw a flicker of fear in her eyes, but also something determined, like a thin, taut string on the verge of snapping, but not yet ready to break. Mid-shift, an elderly customer complained about cold food. Marcus was about to toss the plate into the trash, but Ava gently stopped him, whispered something, reheated the plate herself, decorated it, and personally delivered it back with a sincere apology. The customer smiled, nodded, and left a $5 tip. But Leo noticed Brad standing in the corner, glaring at Ava, his eyes darkening. Brad pulled out his phone, sent a text, and smirked. When Ava returned to the beverage station, Leo noticed her hand shaking slightly, her eyes glancing toward Brad before lowering again. But just seconds later, she took a deep breath, adjusted her apron, tied her hair up higher, and returned to her work. That day, Leo washed hundreds of plates, his hands blistering. But he no longer paid attention to the physical pain. His eyes only followed Ava's steps as she moved between tables, each small frown when she heard a customer complaint, each deep breath to swallow her fear, each flicker of determined resolve. And he realized Ava was hiding something, a truth she couldn't speak. That night, as Leo wiped down the counter, Ava walked past, and their eyes met. She paused, looked at him for a moment, and quietly said, "Don't let them make you pay if a customer walks out. They don't have the right to do that." Then she turned and quickly walked out the door, leaving Leo frozen, his heart pounding. That sentence, short and quiet, carried more weight than any report Noah had ever read. It was a warning, a gesture of empathy, and a sign that Ava had seen, had known, and had chosen to help him, even though they were strangers. Leo stood there for a long time by the counter, staring at the restaurant door that had just closed behind Ava, a strange feeling rising in his chest. Hope. Leo began observing Ava more, not with the eyes of a boss, but with the eyes of a human being searching for answers. She arrived earlier than anyone else, often sitting alone at a corner table before her shift began. On the table was a cheap black coffee, a small notebook, and a pen. Ava would write something down, sometimes looking up around the room, then lowering her head again, her fingers flipping through old pages that were creased and yellowed from water stains. Leo would stand at a distance, drying a glass, never taking his eyes off her. He noticed that sometimes her eyes would stop at Brad before quickly darting away, her breathing becoming shallow, her shoulders trembling slightly. But within seconds, she would take a deep breath, tuck the notebook back into her pocket, stand up, adjust her apron, and walk into her shift with a cold, determined face. Inside the restaurant, the air always grew tense whenever Brad appeared. He would strut through the kitchen smoke with an arrogant gait, smirking, clapping Marcus on the back hard enough to make him flinch. He liked standing behind the register, glancing over receipts, occasionally sneering, "Oh, the customer left this dish. I'll just take it out of your tip." And no one dared to argue. Leo caught Maria standing by the cooler, her eyes red, hands trembling as she counted a few crumpled bills before dropping them into the drawer Brad pointed at. Ava passed by, gently placing a hand on Maria's back, saying nothing, then quietly walking away. Leo heard Maria whisper to Ava, her voice choked with tears, "I only have $12 left to eat for the whole week." Ava froze, her hand tightening around the notebook in her pocket, her eyes darkening before she gently replied, "You won't go hungry. Trust me." That night, when the shift ended, Ava didn't leave like everyone else. Leo pretended to keep wiping the counter, his eyes sneaking glances at her. She moved around the restaurant, wiping tables that were already clean, straightening napkins, folding menus over again. But Leo noticed her hands shaking as she pulled a chair back into place. She walked to the old coffee machine in the corner, crouched down, reached into the compartment below. She pulled out a small black plastic bag carefully opened, and inside she pulled out a neatly folded piece of paper, scribbled something quickly, then tucked it back into the bag and hid it in the slot beneath the bottom of the coffee machine. Ava stood up, her eyes scanning the room, unaware that Leo was watching from the dish station. She exhaled quietly, adjusted her hair, and quickly walked toward the door. Leo waited a few more minutes, looking around the empty restaurant. The ticking of the wall clock echoed, tick, tick, like the beat of his own heart in his chest. Finally, he stepped closer to the coffee machine, bent down, and pulled out the bag. Inside were pieces of paper covered in cramped handwriting. Leo carefully unfolded each piece and read, "Monday, Table 12 complained about hair in the food. Brad deleted the report, refused refund. Wednesday, Maria forced to pay for walkout, $29. Friday, salmon dish tossed for over 5 minutes, actually only 3. Brad made Marcus keep expired meat, forced servers to sell." Leo clenched the piece of paper, a tightness gripping his chest. He realized Ava was not just a server. She was documenting every injustice, every wrongdoing, every hidden pain inside this restaurant, and she was doing it alone, quietly, steadfastly, in fear. He placed the paper bag back exactly where it was, his heart heavy. Back in his small rented room, Leo sat at the rickety wooden table, staring at his hands red and swollen from the hot water, remembering the look in Ava's eyes when she comforted Maria as she cried. He remembered the way she bent down to eye level with a child to offer a cookie with that gentle smile. He remembered the way she adjusted the napkin on the table, as if that small act could make the day a little kinder. Leo realized this was no longer an investigation to save a branch. This was a fight to save a human being. A human being who was standing up against a rotting system with nothing but a pen and a few pieces of paper. Before going to bed, Leo whispered to himself, "Tomorrow, I'll keep watching Ava. I'll find out why she's doing this, and if I can, I'll protect her." The next day, Leo made a point to arrive earlier, standing at the corner near the coffee station, quietly observing Ava. She walked in, nodding at Marcus, giving a small smile to Maria, who was busy arranging the napkins. But the moment she saw Brad, that smile vanished. Her shoulders shrank, her hand tightened around her bag strap, her eyes dropped to the floor. Brad didn't waste the opportunity. He walked by and bumped her shoulder just hard enough to make her stagger slightly. "Watch where you're going, Ava. Don't want to spill water on customers again, do we?" Brad sneered. Ava didn't respond. She simply pressed her lips together, nodded, and quickly moved toward the beverage station. Leo's hands gripped the cleaning towel, heat rising to his face. He took a deep breath, reminding himself that right now he was Leo Torres, the nameless dishwasher. He couldn't step in, not yet. All morning, Leo watched Ava moving through the restaurant, gently taking plates from Marcus as soon as he placed them on the counter, adjusting the dishes, adding a sprig of cilantro, wiping off any sauce on the edges before taking them out to customers. When customers complained, Ava didn't argue. She leaned down, listened, apologized, and quietly returned to the kitchen to fix the dish. Once, Leo saw Ava standing behind the cash register, holding a receipt, her eyes scanning the numbers, then shifting toward Brad, who was laughing with a regular customer. A flicker of anger flashed in her eyes, but instantly it was replaced by resignation. Near the end of the shift, as the customers thinned out, Leo was wiping tables when he heard Ava quietly say to Maria, "Don't worry, I'll cover Table 7's bill for you today." Maria froze, tears welling up in her eyes. "Ava, you don't have to do that." Ava simply smiled, placing her hand on Maria's. "You need the money for food more than I do right now." Maria burst into tears, hugging Ava, while Ava gently held her, her eyes quietly drifting toward Brad, who was standing at the register, watching them with a look of contempt. Leo stood there, his heart tightening. He realized Ava was not only documenting the wrongdoing, she was using her small paycheck to save her co-workers, patching up the holes Brad had deliberately created to squeeze money from the staff. That evening, after the shift, Ava stayed behind again, moving around the restaurant, checking the chairs, picking up napkins dropped under tables, her thin fingers wiping away small specks of dirt no one else would have noticed. Then she walked over to the coffee machine, crouched down, and pulled out the familiar black bag. She took out a piece of paper, quickly writing something down, her hands shaking so much the ink smeared along the edge of the paper. Leo held his breath. Ava placed the paper back in the bag, took a deep breath, and lifted her head, her eyes blankly scanning the empty restaurant. The yellow light cast shadows across her face, her eyes sunken from lack of sleep, her lips pressed tightly together, her eyes shimmering with tears that she refused to let fall. In that moment, Leo realized this young woman was carrying a battle that no one else knew about. After Ava left, Leo stepped forward and took out the piece of paper to read it. Ava's handwriting was shaky. Thursday, Brad made Marcus keep chicken 2 days past expiration, relabeled. Marcus, too scared to refuse, afraid of being fired. Customers could get sick. Need to report ASAP. Leo carefully folded the paper, put it into his shirt pocket, and replaced the original in its hiding place, his hands trembling. He remembered the look in Ava's eyes when she comforted the child, the way she looked at Maria, and the way she looked at Brad, the fear, the determination, the heartbreaking patience. Leo sat down on the wooden chair, burying his face in his hands. He had once thought that saving a restaurant meant restructuring, cutting costs, adjusting staff. But now he understood. Saving a restaurant meant saving the people who kept it alive with their kindness. Back in his rented room that night, Leo pulled out his phone, looking at the photo his daughter had sent him, smiling brightly while holding her college diploma high above her head, the sign in her hands reading, "I did it, Dad." He wondered, if my daughter were in Ava's place, I would hope someone would be there to protect her. Leo closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and silently promised, "Tomorrow, I will approach Ava. She won't have to fight this battle alone anymore." The next morning, Leo arrived early, but Ava was already there, sitting alone at the corner table. She wasn't writing anything, just sitting there, her hands clasped together, eyes staring off into the distance. The morning light streamed through the glass, casting across her face, the hollows beneath her eyes deep, the dark circles stark against her pale skin. Leo walked over to the coffee station, poured himself a glass of water, quietly watching. After a while, Ava stood up, adjusted her apron, took a deep breath, then returned to her work, walking between the rows of tables, her eyes regaining their usual calm. That day, Brad called all the employees in for a quick meeting after the lunch rush. He stood there with his arms crossed, his eyes cold and sharp. I've found out that someone among you has been sneaking around, taking notes, ratting out what's going on in this restaurant." The room went dead silent. The only sound was Maria's quickened breathing, while Marcus stood pressed against the wall, his hands clenched tight. Brad's eyes scanned each person, lingering the longest when they reached Ava, the corner of his mouth curling into a sneer. "If anyone gets caught, don't blame me for being ruthless." He slapped his hand on the table with a loud smack, then turned and walked away. Ava lowered her head, her hands buried in her jacket pockets, clenching so hard the veins on her wrists stood out in green lines. Leo saw everything, and he knew Brad was beginning to suspect Ava. That night, after closing, Ava stayed behind again. Leo pretended to mop the floor, waiting. She quietly stepped over to the coffee machine, bent down, pulled out the black bag, checking the notes inside, her hands trembling violently. At that exact moment, a shadow appeared behind her. "Brad, what do you think you're doing?" His voice was low, dangerous. Ava froze, her hand clutching the piece of paper, eyes wide, breath quickening. I'm just checking the coffee machine." Brad stepped closer, bending down, his eyes probing and sharp. "Seems like you enjoy snooping around places that aren't your business, huh?" Ava stepped back, her back hitting the counter, her hand still gripping the note inside her pocket. At that instant, Leo set the bucket down and stepped out from behind the counter, his eyes locked on Brad. "She's doing her job." Brad snapped around, his eyes narrowing. "Since when does an old dishwasher get to interfere in my business?" Leo took a deep breath, his gaze unwavering. "I don't like seeing people threatened, especially when they've done nothing wrong." Brad let out a mocking laugh, stepping closer to Leo, his voice dripping with contempt. "Don't think washing dishes well gives you the right to teach me how to manage around here." Ava clenched her hands, standing between them, her eyes frightened, but gathering every ounce of courage. "I haven't done anything wrong," Brad smirked. "We'll see about that." He walked away, his heavy steps echoing on the cold floor, leaving the air thick and suffocating. Ava let out a shaky breath, leaning back against the counter, tears brimming in her eyes. She looked at Leo, gratitude and fear mixing in her gaze. "You shouldn't have stepped in. Brad, he'll be watching you now." Leo looked straight into Ava's eyes, his voice soft but firm. "I'm not afraid of him." Ava fell silent, her eyes scanning Leo, catching on his swollen, reddened hands, his cheap jacket, and the unwavering determination in his eyes, something that didn't belong to a dishwasher afraid of losing his job. In that moment, Leo knew she had realized something. Ava lowered her head, her voice trembling. Who are you? Why do you care so much?" Leo remained silent for a moment, then quietly said, "I just don't want to see good people get hurt." Ava's hands tightened, her eyes turning red, her lips pressing together before she turned and ran out, leaving Leo standing there, his hand resting gently on the old coffee machine. That night, Leo returned to his room, lying on the hard bed, staring at the ceiling, illuminated by the flickering streetlights. He remembered the look Ava gave him, a look filled with suspicion, hope, and pain. He remembered the way she stood in front of Brad, her voice shaking, but refusing to bow her head. He remembered her eyes as she comforted Maria, the way she smiled at the child, and the way her hands shook as she scribbled the truth onto those scraps of paper. Leo knew he didn't have much time left. Brad was starting to suspect. Ava was being backed into a corner. And if he didn't act now, Brad would destroy Ava, and this restaurant would continue to rot. Leo closed his eyes, placing a hand over his chest, making a silent promise. The next morning the sky was grey, light drizzle misting the air. The atmosphere inside Evan's table was heavy, unusually quiet. Leo washed dishes, but his eyes never left Ava, who was arranging tables. She didn't smile at customers like she usually did. Her eyes were distant, her hands shaking slightly as she laid white napkins on each table. Brad walked past, glancing at Ava, then at Leo, giving a smug, crooked smile. That afternoon, a young couple came in with their little daughter, requesting a gluten-free meal for her severe allergy. Ava took the order, her eyes sharp with focus. Brad stood nearby, glancing at Ava, sneering. Always making things complicated, wasting everyone's time. Ava didn't respond, walking straight into the kitchen to tell Marcus, "Gluten-free dish. Double-check everything." Marcus nodded, worry clouding his face. 20 minutes later, the dish was ready. Ava checked it carefully one last time when Brad suddenly appeared, snatching the tray from Marcus's hands. "Customers waiting. I'll take it out." Ava stepped forward to stop him, her voice shaking but firm. "I need to check it again. It's gluten-free." Brad's eyes narrowed. "Who do you think you are to question me?" Ava took a deep breath. "I'm the one who will be responsible if that child ends up in the hospital." The kitchen fell dead silent. Brad's teeth clenched, his voice dropping to a growl. "You've crossed the line, Ava." Noah stepped out from the dish station, peeling off his gloves, walking forward, his voice deep and clear. "No, Brad. The one crossing the line here is you." Brad whipped around, stunned, his eyes narrowing. You're that dishwasher, Leo or whatever." Noah looked him straight in the eyes, each word ringing like a bell. "I am Noah Evans, founder of Evans Table." The kitchen went completely silent. Marcus's mouth dropped open. Maria froze, the tray in her hands nearly slipping to the floor. Ava stood beside Noah, her eyes red but steady, giving a small nod. Brad stumbled back a step, his face draining of color. No way. You're joking." Noah pulled out a special employee badge from his pocket, along with a photo of him shaking hands with the mayor at the grand opening of the very first branch, holding it up for everyone to see. "I'm not joking, Brad." Noah turned to Marcus, his voice gentle. "Marcus, do you remember the day you were forced to keep expired meat?" Marcus nodded, tears streaming down his cheeks. I was afraid of being fired." Noah placed a reassuring hand on Marcus's shoulder. "It's over now." Then he turned to Maria. "Maria, the money you were forced to pay for that walkout customer, I will reimburse you in full." Maria broke down, collapsing onto the table in sobs. Brad screamed out, "This is fraud. You can't prove I did any of that." Ava pulled out a carefully wrapped stack of papers from the pocket of her apron. These were the notes she had quietly written for months, recording every time Brad committed fraud, every time he forced employees to pay out of pocket, every time he kept expired food, every time he deleted customer complaints. She held the stack high, her voice ringing out in the dead silence. "These are the proof. Brad lunged to grab the stack, but Noah stepped in front, his gaze cold as ice. "You just ended your own career, Brad." At that exact moment, 2 security guards walked in, accompanied by a man in a grey suit, the regional operations director. He gave Noah a small nod. "We received the report, reviewed the cameras, and everything Ava documented matches perfectly. Brad, you are immediately suspended and will be investigated for abuse, fraud, employee intimidation, and food safety violations." Brad stuttered, panic flooding his eyes. No, I was just... But no one was listening anymore. The 2 security guards stepped forward, taking hold of Brad's arms. He struggled, but it was pointless. Before he was led away, his eyes darted toward Ava, filled with hatred, but also fear. Ava didn't lower her head. She looked him straight in the eyes, her voice steady. "We won't stay silent anymore." After Brad was taken away, the restaurant fell silent. Customers began whispering, but instead of fear, they nodded, murmuring. Finally, someone stood up. Maria ran to Ava, hugging her, sobbing. "Thank you, thank you." Marcus bowed his head to Noah. "Mr. Evans, thank you." Noah looked around at the people, now crying, now laughing, now sighing in relief, then turned to Ava, pride shining in his eyes. "Today, you saved this place." Ava wiped her tears away, her eyes bright, steady. "No, we saved it." The next day, soft sunlight streamed into Evan's table, clearing away the heavy air that had clung to it for months. Brad had been arrested, the truth had been exposed, but the people here still didn't know what came next. Noah walked into the restaurant, no longer wearing the dishwasher's apron, but a simple white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, his face gentle, his eyes resolute. Ava was arranging the tables when she saw Noah, pausing for a moment, then offering him a small smile. A smile that no longer hid fear, but was genuine. Noah nodded back, then patted Marcus on the shoulder. "Today, we start over." Marcus smiled softly, nodding, tears welling in his eyes. Maria came close, holding Ava's hand, her hand trembling slightly, but her eyes bright with hope. Noah gathered all the employees in the restaurant, standing in the space still scented with fresh coffee and newly baked pastries, and spoke. "I'm sorry I didn't see what was happening. I'm sorry I allowed someone like Brad to remain in this system for so long." His eyes moved to each person looking back at him. "But starting today, I will change everything." He turned to Ava, pride in his eyes. "Ava, I want you to help me lead this place." Ava's eyes widened, stunned, her lips parting. You want me?" Noah nodded. "I want you to take on the role of safety and employee culture supervisor. You won't need to hide scraps of paper under the coffee machine anymore. We will have a clear, safe reporting system, and I want you to lead it." Ava brought her hand to her mouth, tears spilling over as Maria hugged her from behind, while Marcus began to clap, soon followed by the other employees, their applause echoing warmly throughout the restaurant. Noah handed Ava a small box. Inside were the pieces of paper she had once hidden under the coffee machine, now laminated, organized carefully. "These notes saved this place and the people in it. I want them kept so everyone will remember. Kindness and courage start with the smallest actions." Ava wept, clutching the box to her chest, tears streaming down her face, but her smile remained, her body releasing the weight she had carried for so long. That afternoon, Ava led her first staff meeting in her new role. She stood before everyone, her hands still trembling slightly, but her voice clear, her eyes bright. I know all of you have been afraid to speak the truth, but starting today, you don't have to be afraid anymore. Whatever the issue, you can come to me or write it down in the report book and we will resolve it together. No one will be punished. No one will be silenced. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Maria raised her hand, her voice shaking. I'm sorry I didn't speak up before. Ava smiled. We don't have to apologize for being afraid. We just have to promise we won't let fear control us anymore. Marcus stood up, raising his hand. I promise. One by one, hands went up, tears mixing with smiles. That evening, Ava left the restaurant, stepping into the street as the yellow lights glowed on her hair, her eyes looking ahead. Maria ran after her, handing her a small pastry. Ava, today I got my first tip from a customer because they said I served them with real care. I want to share half with you. Ava laughed, ruffling Maria's hair. Keep it for your dinner. Maria hugged Ava tightly, then ran off, leaving Ava smiling after her. When Ava turned back, Noah was standing there, hands in his pockets, watching her quietly. Ava, you did a great job. Ava took a deep breath, nodding, her voice steady. You gave me a chance, and I won't waste it. Noah placed his hand on Ava's shoulder, his voice deep. We won't let anyone else live in fear. Ava looked at Noah, smiling, her eyes glinting with firm resolve. We won't let anyone else live in fear ever again. That night, when Ava returned to her small room, she opened the box of her old notes, touching each shaky line she had once written in fear. She took the first piece and pressed it into a new notebook, writing on the first page, Tomorrow I will keep writing, not out of fear, but out of hope. She placed the notebook beside her pillow, exhaling deeply, for the first time in a long while, ready to sleep in peace. A week later, the Evans Table Stockton branch was no longer a place heavy with gloom. Walking in, people no longer saw fearful, downturned eyes, no longer heard worried whispers when Brad walked by, no longer felt the heavy sighs in the walk-in fridge. Instead, Marcus, now officially appointed by Noah as head chef, smiled as he placed dishes on the counter, reminding the staff, Don't forget to double-check before serving. Customers deserve the best. Maria, once the trembling girl afraid of losing her job, now confidently approached tables with a bright smile. Thank you for coming. If there's anything wrong, please let us know immediately. In the small office behind the restaurant, Ava sat at her new desk, the wall above adorned with framed copies of the notes she had once written, next to a sign that read, Ava Protocol. Speaking the truth is a duty, not a fear. An anonymous suggestion box stood by the register, marked clearly, Let us know if something isn't right. We will listen. Every morning, Ava opened the box, reading each note, nodding as she recorded them. Some were small complaints. No napkins at table 12. Lemonade too sweet. Marcus looks tired today, maybe needs a break. and Ava noted each, addressing them that day. There was no more fear, only trust. Noah sat in the corner, watching Ava work. He saw her smile as she addressed a customer complaint, saw her help Maria carry drinks, saw her nod in approval when Marcus presented a beautifully plated dish. Ava had become the soul of this place, and Noah knew he had been right to trust her. One afternoon, as the restaurant grew busy, a little boy came in with his mother, requesting a gluten-free meal. Ava personally took the order, carefully overseeing every step to avoid cross-contamination. When she brought the dish to the table, the boy beamed, and his mother, moved, said, "Thank you. My son has severe allergies, and this is the first time he's been able to eat in a restaurant without fear." Ava bent down, smiling. "You are our special guest, and you deserve to be safe." The boy raised his hand for a high five, and laughter echoed through the restaurant, the warmth filling the air. News of Stockton's transformation spread quickly. Other Evans Table branches began messaging, asking Ava to share how to implement the Ava protocol. Noah decided to organize a system-wide online meeting, inviting Ava to present. The night before the meeting, Ava sat alone in her room, flipping through her old notes. She remembered the days hiding behind the counter, crying in fear, the nights writing shaky words, Maria's and Marcus's eyes, the fear in every step. Now she could step into the light, telling everyone, "We have the right to be heard. We have the right to be respected." On the day of the meeting, over 30 branches connected online, the faces of managers and employees appearing on screens. Ava stood beside Noah, her voice rising, her head slightly bowed at first, but her eyes growing bright as she saw everyone listening. "I am not a hero. I was just a tired server. Tired of seeing good people silenced, of seeing customers disrespected, of watching injustice repeat itself." She held up a laminated note. "I started by writing the truth on these scraps of paper. Today, I want to tell you all, never be afraid to speak the truth." Noah placed his hand on Ava's shoulder, smiling. "Starting today, the entire Evans Table system will adopt the Ava protocol." The screen erupted with applause, smiles, and emotional eyes from employees across every branch. A manager from San Diego raised a hand. "Ava, thank you. My staff cried hearing your story. They said, for the first time, they feel protected." Ava's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. "We will change things together." That afternoon, when things quieted, Ava stepped out of the restaurant, the golden sun spilling across the street. Maria ran up, handing Ava an iced tea. "You deserve to have something nice to drink." Ava took the tea, tapping it gently against Maria's cup, her eyes glistening. "So do you." Across the street, Noah stood watching the two young women laugh together. A soft breeze brushed past, and he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time return to his heart. "Thank you for saving my son." The little boy shyly stepped forward, handing Ava a crumpled card with a red heart drawn on it. "You're the best." Ava took the card, her hand trembling, bending down to touch the boy's hand. "No, you are the bravest." Noah looked at each of them, his gaze warm and steady. "We will never be afraid again. We will put the safety of our customers and the fairness of our employees first. because a restaurant, a company. That night, when Ava returned to her room, she opened her new notebook, where she now recorded good things instead of wrongdoings. She wrote, "Today, Maria smiled when she received a tip from a customer. Marcus confidently introduced a new dish. A little boy with allergies ate safely here, and I was no longer afraid." She put her pen down, looking out the window where the yellow lights bathed the small street, her heart lighter than it had been in years. At home, Noah sat on his balcony, moonlight reflecting in the tea glass he held. He remembered those first days as Leo, standing over the sink, hearing the clatter of dishes, seeing tired, bowed heads. Now he knew those heads had lifted, laughter had returned, and tears of fear had been replaced by tears of happiness. He whispered softly to himself, "Sometimes, to change an entire system, all it takes is one person willing to begin."